Hello. In this video I'm going to go over Chapter 12, Counseling Families and Groups. So first of all, family counseling. Family counseling is when counselors work with families to utilize a systems perspective. The family unit provides the context for understanding its individual members and their problems, and the actions taken by one family member will influence the other members. Then their reactions in turn will have a reciprocal effect on the individual. It's a cyclic process like the butterfly effect. And so what this means is that whenever we're doing family counseling, the client is actually the family, not the individual. And so you view the family as almost an individual itself. And whenever you're seeking to understand and do therapy with the family group, you're doing so from a systems perspective. And so you're utilizing systems theories, family theories, and the appropriate techniques as well. And so you certainly can use some of the individual counseling theories that you'll learn about in your theories class, but for the most part you're going to utilize a different set of theories as you're conceptualizing what's going on with the family. Groups are going to work the same way, and couples are going to work the same way as well. So again, when you're doing counseling with multiple people, the client is the family or the group. Not any one person. Now, there may be instances where you're doing individual counseling with someone, and maybe you bring in their family to work with them. In that case, the individual may still remain the client, and you're just bringing in the family, maybe to consult or so that you can mediate conversations or things like that. Counselors who regularly counsel couples or families should be familiar with two specialized codes of ethics for this population, the IAMFC ethical code and the AAMFT. Well, why can't you open it? Go back. Let's see. Oh, no. Online. Copy. Let's see what this does. Go back. IAMFC. Remember that. IAMFC code of ethics. There we go. Now, this is the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors. And then we have the AMFT. Let's see if this one will work. It's not opening them up. Anyway, this is the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. So these are specific associations that do marriage and family work. And there's also associations that do group work as well. Code of Ethics. So here we go. And so you'll see it's a little bit briefer than the ACA Code of Ethics, but it does follow kind of the same guidelines, right? Confidentiality, and it's going to be specific to working with families and with groups. Sometimes individual therapy leads to couples or family therapy, and if that's the case, there are specific standards that relate to that. Informed consent is going to look a little different when you're working with this kind of population. Obtaining consent from all members of a family is sometimes not possible. So on page 291, there's questions that need to be addressed with informed consent before working with a family. Some family counselors will withhold services until all family members agree to participate. Other counselors make the services available for those members that desire counseling. And so you might just think about which stance you might take and why. There's no right or wrong. Whenever you're doing informed consent with a group, whenever we're talking about confidentiality in particular, and I think that might be on a different slide, but we can't guarantee confidentiality when we're doing group work or family work, because we can't guarantee that other people will maintain confidentiality. And that would be part of the informed consent. Family counselors should make members aware of the potential changes in family relationships that may occur as a result of counseling. And the counselor informs the family that the family system will be the focus of the process, and that no one family member will be treated as the identified patient who is the source of the problems. Client welfare, some things to keep in mind. The needs of the family take priority over the best interests of the individual. Individual needs outside of this may have to be met in individual therapy. So if someone needs individual therapy as well, they do that on their own. With family counseling, the family as a system is going to be the priority. Legally, the family are considered the counselor's client. So all the members of the family are considered the client. When working with non-traditional families, only biological parents or court-ordered guardians have rights over the children as members. So whenever we think about things like informed consent and access to records, that's what we're talking about. Risky techniques, so some things to keep in mind. The use of non-traditional techniques is sometimes common in family therapy. These types of techniques can be very powerful and positive effects, but they can also have disastrous effects too. They can be a risk that the counselor was operating outside the scope of accepted practice. Paradoxical directives or interventions in family sculpting are examples of risky techniques. And so these might be ways like family sculpting. This is when one member of the family treats the family as like an art project, and they place them in different positions and different places around the room. Another technique, and this is going to be based on the theory, but or a specific theory, but in this instance, the counselor seeks to become part of the family. And this can be risky if the counselor's kind of inserting themselves in the family versus kind of maintaining that outside perspective as a counselor. And so that can be a challenge as well. Special concerns. Family violence, past and or current violence within a family is actually commonplace. 50 to 60% of couples seeking counseling services reported at least one incidence of violence in their relationship. The system's approach should not be employed with a family where violence is an issue, because the abuser should be held responsible for their behavior, not be allowed to blame their actions on the fault of the family system. So should the abuser be allowed to attend family therapy with the other members? How will the counselor balance imposing their own values on the abused client's right to autonomy in making decisions about leaving or staying? And so those are some issues that we need to consider when we're thinking about doing marriage or family therapy with victims and perpetrators of violence. Privacy, confidentiality, and privileged communication. Privacy and confidentiality cannot be fully guaranteed in family counseling, like I just mentioned. Privileged communication is waived if a third party is present, so privilege isn't an option in family therapy. And there is a specific ethical standard related to this on B6E. And you might also review the case of Sanjeev on page 296. Other issues, family secrets. A family member shares a secret applicable to the family unit but has withheld the secret from the rest of the family or from a specific member. Some counselors believe the secret should be kept. Some counselors refuse to keep secrets. Some counselors retain, and this is when the family member shares the secret with the counselor but not anyone else. Some counselors retain flexibility in the decision and exercise their professional judgment, telling or keeping the secret in accordance with the greatest benefit for the family. Remember, the family unit is your client. which stance do you believe is correct? And there is an ethical standard related to this, B4B. And so, again, this is, kind of, as you can see, there are quite a few ethical dilemmas that go along with doing family and group counseling. And so this is one of them. Do you keep the secret? Do you not keep the secret? Maybe you have, a stance that you take going into the counseling process, and if that's the case, then you would want to talk about the informed consent process. And I would, certainly consider that informed consent whenever you're working. If one of the family members, comes to the session early or stays a little bit later, really try to have a conversation with them before maybe they get to the point where they're sharing a secret, although that may not be an option. In divorce and child custody, these are pages 298 to 299. This gives a general overall overview of the legalities involved. It's important for counselors to understand the nature of child custody so that they won't be tempted to involve themselves inappropriately in custody battles. So again, remembering what we talked about just in, I think it's the previous chapter. Unless you're doing child custody work, you avoid having an opinion on a child custody case in court, if at all possible. So you can certainly share information if you're subpoenaed and if you're asked to, and you may be asked to by parents. But unless you're doing child custody evaluations, you avoid having an opinion on that matter. Competence. Family counseling is based on a different theoretical perspective than individual counseling. Skills and techniques are different. Educational requirements are different to become a licensed marriage and family therapist. There is a professional divide. Should a specialized license be required to legally counsel families and couples? Should a generalist be allowed to legally counsel families and couples? What is your stance? Why? So again, as we see, kind of throughout the field of counseling and therapy, there are some kind of issues to be considered. And you will have a group counseling class, and LPCs do group counseling all the time, but especially according to kind of the LMFT world, they would say that you do need specific training to be a marriage and family therapist because again, you are taking on a totally different theoretical perspective. You're using different theories than you would use than you're learning in the theories class. And you'll get some of that in the group counseling class, but it's just going to be a taste. Counselor values. The personal values of counselors undeniably influence how they counsel. Counseling is never value-free, and all family counselors have their own definition of healthy versus dysfunctional family systems. It is impossible for counselors to avoid using their influence in subtle ways, most times without being aware of their actions. And this is true with all counseling as well. So we just, it's like the multicultural competence issue. We can't move away from who we are. We can't remove ourselves from our experiences, our values, and our beliefs. We just have to do the best we can to be aware of those and consider how they affect the counseling process. Group counseling. Many of the ethical and legal issues discussed for family counseling apply here. The primary difference between family and group counseling is that group members usually don't know each other and don't have personal relationships with each other outside the counseling environment. So if family counseling, you're really you're bringing things from the outside in. With group counseling, you're doing the same, but you don't have prior relationships, and so there's a different level of building rapport. And establishing kind of a relationship and group norms that you have with group counseling that you don't have with family counseling. The Professional Association, Association for Specialists in Group Work, have created 2 documents related to group work. They've got best practice guidelines and then professional standards for the training of group workers. Informed consent. Potential group members must be given informed consent for the proposed group experience, just like individual members get informed consent for individual counseling. Since the format is different, though, additional elements of the proposed relationship and experience must be addressed. This ensures that potential members have been fully informed before making a decision to pursue group admission. The preference is to complete this process in a pre-group interview or screening, so you bring people in before you start the group and do a screening with them, an interview, and discuss informed consent. Purpose, format, procedures, rules, services of the group, member and leader roles, member rights and responsibilities, all are preset. Will the group meet my needs and goals? And that's the question you're presenting to the client. So you're explaining everything to them. The purpose of the group, the format, we're going to meet an hour a week on Thursday evenings for 6 weeks. Procedures, rules, you're probably going to have rules established, though you may develop some rules in that first group meeting as well. And again, the rest of informed consent. What's my role going to be as the leader? What's your role going to be as the member? And what are your rights and responsibilities? Risks. Leader has less situational control over events, and so you want to make sure that the client is aware of that there may be some risks depending on who ends up in the group and how things play out with everybody. Confidentiality and limits. Again, we can't guarantee this in a group setting. The process of group syncing with members' culture. Again, considering culture and how the group itself may play out within specific members' cultures. The freedom to exit the group, personal choice for each potential member, so they always have the option to drop out if they're not comfortable or if something happens, unless they're court ordered to attend, in which case they are required to continue until the end. So some specific screening. This is the interview to determine if the potential member is a fit for the group, and vice versa, to let them know of information about the group, and so that they can make a choice. Client welfare and protection from harm. Participating in counseling is a catalyst for personal change and can pose psychological risk. Some members of risk are scapegoating members. This is where one client kind of becomes the fall guy for the group, and maybe gets blamed for some things. Subjecting members to undue pressure, so peer pressure. We see that in group settings. Misuse of confrontation. So confrontation can be a useful tool, but if some members take it too far, it can certainly be a risk. And injury relating from group exercises that involve physical contact. So if you choose to use physical contact, and this is certainly something you would want to consider with the population you're working with, whether it's appropriate or not, but there may be injury as well. Privacy and confidentiality. Again, counselor cannot guarantee confidentiality. Confidentiality with minors. Risk is when a member discloses risky behavior that the parent should know about. Do you break confidentiality? Do you inform the parent? The answer is case by case. Disclosing the limits of confidentiality to parents and members up front helps with prevention of these issues. And it's really, and this is I think one of the hardest ethical dilemmas is, how do you determine what's, risky behavior can fall under that kind of harm to self component of confidentiality when we would break confidentiality, but how do you determine it, right? It can be kind of subjective. Maybe it's drug use, maybe it's marijuana versus alcohol, or maybe then we have some harder drugs in there, maybe meth or heroin, and maybe you choose to disclose to parents any drug use, whether it's alcohol, pot, or something else, or maybe you opt to differentiate between those drugs. And so again, there's no kind of hard and fast rule. It's really just up to you. And your organization's policies may play a part in this as well. So you want to certainly seek supervision when you're trying to make a decision like this. Privileged communication. When counseling is with more than one individual, generally this is waived. So again, you can't claim privilege in the judicial system because whenever you're doing group counseling. We strive to avoid dual relationships, as in individual counseling. The appropriateness depends on the type of group. The task groups in a work environment will have casual contact between leaders and members, and counseling groups outside contact can be counterproductive. And so you'll learn in your group course, of course, the different types of groups. But like a task group is where you're working on a project, and so maybe it's not really as serious, and so maybe you're facilitating, a group of teenagers are working on. I'm thinking of. Oh shoot! When I was in Nashville, there was a woman who did videos with teenagers. So they were arrested, and as part of their I say punishment, but it was really more rehab. But as part of their kind of probation or whatever, they were required to create a video with this woman, and so they worked together. And she wasn't a therapist; she was like a filmmaker. But it would still apply if you were, using a kind of a project like this as in counseling. But they would work together and create a film, and it was more of a task-based group. And so they, while the process itself was therapeutic, they didn't really talk about a whole lot of, personal things in that group. They did in the video, and depending on the video and the group who was creating it. But the counseling itself wasn't super invasive, and so dual relationships in that setting wouldn't be a huge issue, versus like if you're doing a counseling group where you're doing therapy and really kind of getting deep in the group, then you really want to strive to avoid dual relationships. And the leader should monitor for self-disclosure for content and rationale, and so it's really up to the leader to, you want to self-disclose to some extent, right, depending on the group and the population and whatnot. But as with any other therapy, you're just careful with self-disclosure, and you're intentional about it. What's the purpose? Why am I, telling about myself? Maybe, I certainly want to tell a little bit about myself to kind of build rapport and to give myself kind of a personality in the group, but you also want to be careful about not becoming a member of the group and kind of maintaining that leader role. Other issues, socializing. So there are risks, but potential benefits from members socializing outside of group sessions. 12-step programs, members serve as sponsors for one another. So there's certainly benefits to that socialization. In institutional settings, so in schools, hospitals, encounters between members is inevitable. It's just going to happen. In residential settings, it's going to happen. Leaders cannot control what members do with their time outside of group sessions. What you can do is talk about, confidentiality and informed consent, and really talk about what it's going to be like, if people choose to socialize outside of the group setting. Competence. Most all counselors will conduct group work as part of their professional practice. Training in this area is essential to be fully prepared. CACREP requires it in counselor ed programs. There's also the Association for Group Work. It's equally important to update these learned skills as time goes by with CEUs and other training. So you are going to take the group counseling class. You do have to do 10 hours of group work in your practicum internship, potentially. And so you just want to make sure that you're competent, and likely if you're doing just the bare minimum, you probably aren't going to be competent to be a group counselor, and so it would take further supervision and training to really be able to be a group leader well. Diversity and values considerations. It is crucial that the group leader be aware of their own cultural background, attitudes, values, and beliefs. These all influence the way in which one works with others in any setting. And the ASGW did create the multicultural and social justice competence principles for group workers. And that's it for this chapter. We're done.